Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Road to the Blue Map, brought to you by Rohogo Vacation Rentals. If you're looking to vacation around the Guntersville area, make sure to check out Rohogo. You can Google search them, go to their website, see what they have to offer. But if you're looking to vacation up here around the Guntersville area, make sure to check out Rohogo. We appreciate them and their sponsorship here with Average Joe Sports Talk for Road to the Blue Map. Caleb Brooks, Bo Starkey here with you to bring you all of the Week 1 matchups. It's the second week of the year, but yes, last week was considered Week 0. This week considered Week 1. And Bo, we are getting into some big rivalry matchups all throughout the state, and should be a really, really fun week of football now here, getting this second week of the season started.
Absolutely, Caleb. And the how do you the pronunciation?
Rohogo.
Dennis Scott of NBA TV and TNT actually stayed there a couple of weeks ago. That's what kind of level we're talking about here. So if you're looking to vacation anywhere in Alabama, I'd highly consider Guntersville, because not only that place, but there are several places here in Guntersville that we can put you in touch with to vacation. But here's the deal. You got guys on NBA TV and TNT coming up here staying. That tells you all you need to know about this area of the state. But yeah, you're right. When you go to talking about rivalries and a lot of these guys, in Week 1, which used to be, we have the term Week 0 now, but, on paper, this is Week 2 from the old school guys, but none of that means anything. What it means is now we're rolling over into some of these non-region games that you have to get played. That's what we're looking at now. You're talking about rivalries of teams that you want to get on the schedule that you possibly couldn't get on that Week 10. So you would rather play a lot of these big teams early, so we get these favorable big-time matchups this early in the year. That's what we're looking at.
Should be a lot of fun, and we're going to get things started on Thursday night with Parker and Ramsey. Talk to us a little bit about this matchup here. And, we saw it last year. Parker, big upset over Clay Chalkville there in the playoffs. And for Ramsey, they obviously go on and win the 5A state championship. So this sets up for a really fun game on Thursday night.
Two of the most well-respected, well-known coaches in North Alabama, at Parker and at Ramsey. Both of these guys, Coach Jackson at Ramsey, Coach Frank Warren at Parker, two well-respected guys around the Birmingham area. And I'm going to tell you something about both of these teams and both of these coaches. They're class act. If you've never went into their field houses and into their locker rooms and seen what these guys deal with on a day-to-day basis, it's a different level. I have mad respect for both of these gentlemen. Not a negative word to say about either one of these two. Now, as you said, they shocked the world last year in the playoffs, that being Parker. They beat the favorite to win 6A last year, Clay Chalkville, in the first round of the playoffs, 7-6 game. All right. Then you flip it over to Ramsey. Guess what they did? They ran the table, won the state championship. Coach Jackson, and we featured them about their weight room. Their weight room literally you just have to look at it on Average Joe's. I could sit here and do a whole segment on their weight room, what adversities he had to overcome to win that state championship. But at the end of the day, we're not here to talk about negative stuff. We're here to talk about this football game. This is going to be a game of execution. Two very talented teams, two teams from the Birmingham area with two well-respected coaches. Whoever executes the best in this game will win. Last week, Parker defeated Fairfield 55-0. Ramsey defeated a very tough Hueytown team 28-14. Ramsey leads the all-time series 8-6, but at the end of the day, who executes the best will win this football game.
No doubt about it. Should be a really fun matchup. Parker beat Fairfield 55-0 last week. Ramsey got a win over Hueytown.
Can I have that? That's right there.
They had a win over Hueytown, who obviously played Clay Chalkville for
Thank you, Reggie.
That 5A state or that 6A state championship up there in Birmingham 2 seasons ago. So should be a fun one there. Mountain Brook at James Clemens. This will be your AHSAA TV game of the week on Thursday night. Should be a really fun matchup with Mountain Brook having to travel on the road to James Clemens. Mountain Brook fell to a 7A team this past week in Vestavia, 35-10, and a surprising score. They actually jumped out to a 3-0 lead, and then Vestavia outscored them 35-7 the rest of the game. And so for Coach Yeager and his group now, need a big rebound this week, and they're going to have their work cut out for them, as James Clemens was able to go to Gardendale and beat a really good Gardendale football team 26-21 last Friday night. And so a great start to the season for James Clemens. And Should be a really fun matchup with these two programs. And for Mountain Brook, it's not necessarily must win because it's not a region game, but from a confidence standpoint, you lose this game, you're looking at 3 straight losses now when you date back to the state championship from this past year. And so a program that was really riding high heading into Auburn last year playing for that state championship, all of a sudden you could have lost 3. And now look, this would be 3 pretty good teams to lose to in Saraland, Vestavia, and then James Clemens. But still for Coach Yeager and his group, just from a confidence standpoint, you feel like they really need this one as they get into region play here coming up.
No doubt. I agree with you 100%. And who would have ever thought Chris Yeager could possibly lose 3 games in a row? Arguably the best on-the-grass coach in the state of Alabama. Let's move on to Friday. You ready to move on to Friday?
Yeah.
Let's move on to Friday. This one in our area means the world. We're talking about Coosa Christian is traveling back to Spring Garden, a place where one of the best playoff football games that we've seen in a long, long time transpired last year in the playoffs when Coosa Christian ended up pulling that game out by the skin of their teeth. Jaden Burns hits a field goal to go ahead and move Coosa Christian on to the semifinals last year. Coosa lost to Geraldine last week 26-0, and a lot of people were like, man, Coosa's done, man, they're finished. I've heard talk and people text me, what's wrong with Coosa? I can tell you what's wrong with Coosa. They're playing probably the favorite in 3A North, albeit with Sylvania have something to say about that. Piedmont will have something to say about that, but I guarantee you they're in that conversation for a favorite in the 3A North. But then you see Spring Garden, it was business as usual. Inter-county rivalry last week. They won 48-28 over Sandrock and Coach Heath and company. The funny thing was last year when these two teams hooked up in the regular season, wasn't even close. Spring Garden won the game going away 27-0. But then, I don't know what it was, and we talked about this 100 times with Coosa Christian, something clicked in that Gatlinburg trip, and they were a different team when they came back. Well, they played Spring Garden again in the playoffs at Spring Garden after the Gatlinburg trip, and it was a different Coosa Christian team, and they ended up edging that one out, which we pre-mentioned a few minutes ago, 31-28. I look for an absolute war this Friday night because it's going to be at the Garden. There's a lot of pride at stake, and Coach Ragsdale definitely wants that one to prove that his Spring Garden Panthers ain't going nowhere in 1A.
Yeah, it should be a fun one. And then another big matchup there on Friday night, Pleasant Valley and Donahoe. Tell us a little bit about that matchup there.
Interesting matchup. Last week, Pleasant Valley went and traveled to Collinsville in a jamboree game, which you will not see on your websites that we always look up these games or whatever. But they played Hoax Bluff very tough, and they also played Collinsville very tough. They did come up short in those 2 games, but that means nothing because now you don't know if Jonathan Nix was holding stuff back or whatever. I can tell you one thing for sure, they have one of the best helmets in the state of Alabama. If you've seen that new Pleasant Valley helmet, unbelievable. All right, and Donahoe got off to a victory last week with a 13-10 victory over Weaver. At the end of the day, this is going to be another Calhoun County rivalry, so to speak, albeit these two don't always link up, but in this case they are. Coach Nix needs this win. This is one of those games that is a very winnable game for him. And ever since they made the move back down to 2A from 3A, it's put a little bit more pressure on that program to win. But at the end of the day, 2A North is extremely tough as well. But if it got down to like the nuts and bolts of this thing, Coach Nix and his squad's really going to need this victory. They needed, in my opinion, a little bit more than Donahoe's already got a victory under their belt.
No doubt. And then another big matchup up here around this area, Southeastern at Raglan. Raglan lost 29-20 to Vincent. Really good Vincent program down there. They actually made it to the state championship in baseball this past year, so that kind of tells you what type of athletes are running around Vincent. And so, a tough loss there to get the season started, but I'm sure that Raglan was able to find out a lot about themselves in that game. When you go and challenge yourself early in the season the way that they were able to do. And then for Southeastern, they won this game last year 40-20 over Raglan. They finished 10-2 last year, ended up losing to Pisgah in the second round. And so for them, you have such a good year last year, you want to build off that. You want to carry that momentum over. And so, obviously for Raglan, you're looking to get win number 1 on the season would be a huge win, especially coming off of last year where they lost to this team. They lose their week 1 game. But for Southeastern, it's a really important game Friday night. This is the start to, hey, we had a great year last year. We liked what we were able to do, but now it's time to build off of that and get even further this year. And this game here with Raglan is really the first step in that direction. And it should be a really, really fun one there between those two teams. And so now switching it over to another game, we got Weaver traveling to Glencoe on Friday night. Tell us about this matchup here. Really a big game for Weaver, looking to get their first win of the year.
Yeah, tough loss last week. We just mentioned Donahoe, and that was a tough loss for Weaver, 13-10 last week. Here's the bottom line on this game. I'm just going to say this. Scott Martin, year 2 at Glencoe, when he first arrived at Glencoe, had some guys exit. He had some guys transfer out. I don't know if guys wanted to buy into his program. Well, now he's got the buy-in from the team. He's got the buy-in from the community. He's got the buy-in from the staff, the administration. Everybody's bought in. So then he goes out and he recruits probably the best person in Glencoe that you could possibly recruit, which is Ryan Chambliss. When he recruits Ryan Chambliss and he brings him over to come coach his defense, and he said, I want our defense to look like your basketball team does defensively. He brings out the basketball guys who didn't play last year. This is the game that's circled on a lot of Glencoe people's calendar, because this is the year that they're going to make that move. Year 1 to year 2 is the best improvement. Coach Martin needs this win. As we talked about, Jonathan Nix needed that win last week. Coach Martin needs this win at Glencoe, and I do feel if they execute properly that they got a good shot in this game, because Weaver, like you said, is reeling from a 0-1 start, a loss to Donahoe last week. But at the end of the day, Weaver has athletes, a ton of athletes, and if they put it together, it could be definitely a tough opponent for Glencoe. But we'll see Friday night. That's why we'll play the game. This next one, it's as big as it gets. In North Alabama, we're talking about Cherokee County, who absolutely took care of business against Alexandria, 48-14 last week. I was really shocked at that score. I thought, maybe they was favored in that game, but I didn't think a 48-14 win. And then you look across the field and you see not Steve Smith coaching Piedmont, you see Jonathan Miller, albeit same county, same successful coach. At this program, Piedmont has been at the peak of Northeast Alabama football for many, many years now. They still got guys. They still got a winning community. They have a successful coach there. I know, albeit Jonathan Miller does not have that elusive state championship yet, he's been in the hunt for it for years and years at Sachs. But on paper, when you go to look at this game, I'm going to throw this stat out here, Caleb. These two teams are tied 38-38-3.
Yeah.
So somebody's got to break that tie this week. I was in Coach Kelly's office today. We did his coaches show today, and he talked about the importance of winning that and winning this game and how horrible their execution was last year. And he admitted it was a mental hurdle last year. They didn't know if they could beat Piedmont. So they executed poorly in the game and somehow won the game. So that's what he's battling this week. But that game right there, another game that's going to go down to execution.
No doubt. A huge game for Coach Miller as he, gets things really started out there with his first real game there with Piedmont, getting going on Friday night. Ider will be traveling to Asbury on Friday night for Coach Chad Grant. He enters his 3rd year there at Ider. He's now had a lot of time to really kind of establish himself, establish his program the way he wants things there at Ider. For Asbury, they lost to a really good Gaston team this past week, 34-14. And you have to feel like there's a little bit of an advantage there having a full game under your belt. You kind of have seen what we need to work on now going into week 2. And so it's going to be a really interesting matchup, for Ider. Just getting year 3 started with Coach Grant, having to work out some of the little kinks, some of the stuff that you can go and do jamborees and all that type of stuff, but it's not being out there playing 48 minutes of real football. And so, should be a really interesting matchup. Ider won this game 28-0 last year. And so for Asbury, started off 0-1 now. Really, really important to play well in this ball game and really kind of get some momentum and build some confidence in this team as we get region play started next week. One of the biggest games that's going to be going on around the state is Anniston at Andalusia. Talk about that game and really how big of a matchup this is, a rematch from the 3rd round of the playoffs this past year.
It's as big as it can get for Anniston. And I'll tell you why. People can say what they want to say, but at the end of the day, you think Andalusia won the state last year and the pressure's on them. That's not true. The pressure's on Anniston. Anniston blew a 21-point lead to Andalusia last year at home in the playoffs in the 3rd round, and it crushed the city of Anniston. There's guys still talking about, every time I go to Anniston or I talk to an Anniston player, that's all they talk about. And when Rico Jackson stepped up, Villa Rica changed they're from Georgia, so they had scheduled Villa Rica this week, and Georgia changed their format of their schedules. So then they're looking for an opponent. So Rico Jackson, when he took the job, he calls Andalusia. He's like, hey, we want to play. They go, yep, let's do it because we can't find nobody. Nobody wants to play these two teams. I'm telling you right now, nobody wants to play these two teams. So it's so bad so that Anniston has to get on a bus and travel 3.5 hours to play them, right? But that's all they can find. So when you talk about a huge matchup, you're talking about a third-round matchup of 4A last year's South, and Andalusia wins this game after being down 21-0, and then goes on to win the state championship and beat Cherokee County, which all people in our area knows that already. But at the end of the day, to me, the pressure's on Anniston because that was such a salty loss, and there's so many guys that returned on that team. Yeah, they did lose 20-something seniors and a couple of guys transferred out, but the core of your team still hurts from that, and they want this win. I'm telling you, these guys want this win. Coach Jackson has come into the fire and wants this win. This is his measuring stick. He told me this today at Oxford, Kia in Oxford. He told me, he said, this is a measuring stick for where we're at right now.
Yeah, it should be a really fun matchup there. Definitely going to be making sure to be checking scores and trying to keep up with that game on Friday night. Big game around the east central part of the state. St. James, your defending 3A champions, now travel to Handley. This is a big-time matchup. Handley is one of those 4 teams in that 4A South. You know, we just talked about Andalusia, Anniston, and then you have Montgomery Catholic and Handley. All 4 of those made it to the third round of the playoffs in 4A there in the South this past year. And, you know, for St. James, this is an important game. Handley was able to win this game 48-35 last year, but that was kind of before St. James really kind of figured out how good they are. And so for them, now having to travel to Handley, we know that Handley is always going to have a really good program and always going to be right there as long as Coach Strain is the head coach there. And so really good measuring stick. I mean, Handley's a team a lot of people look at as a chance to go and win 4A this year, and there's a lot of people that feel like St. James can repeat there in 3A. And so you may have a matchup of 2 big-time champions matching up there in the east central part of the state. So it should be a lot of fun for that matchup on Friday night. And, you know, you just talked about how Anniston feels like Andalusia's a measuring stick. I think for both of those programs, whoever can get a win here in this ballgame, it's a really good measuring stick for them to kind of see where they're at and give a lot of confidence, see who they can go out and go beat.
Yeah, that game is going to be massive. Is the quarterback from St. James still there?
Yeah. Pretty sure he's only a junior. What year's McCreary at
he's
Catholic?
a senior.
Okay, so he's a senior as well then at St. James. They were the same grade.
Yeah, he's that. If he's still there, that's going to be whoo.
Yeah,
I've seen Handley live, and I'm telling you right now that them cats are the real deal. Alexandria at Jacksonville. Caleb, let me tell you something. You rewind the clock to 1 week ago before kickoff, and you see this matchup, and you're thinking this may be the biggest matchup in the state. So people's going to get misconstrued by the score of that Alexandria game they had last week because they see that Cherokee County score and they go, "Oh, Alexandria is not as good as they once was." Actually, I don't believe that. I believe a couple of execution things happened left or right that led to that game, but here at the end of the day, I promise you Alexandria still got a good football team. They got a phenomenal coaching staff, and don't think for 1 minute Alexandria is going to be buried because they're not. So Jacksonville had a huge win. Alexandria had a big loss. Jacksonville beat Boaz, who we had on earlier here at Keeping Up with Marshall County Athletics last week. But it's, again, Alexandria, they got too much pride to lay down. So I expect Alexandria's best this week. I expect nothing less than that. These guys, this staff they have over there, and those kids grew up in this Alexandria system. They didn't get it done last week, and Coach Kelly told me just hours ago in his office that they executed as good as they could execute. He said, we played about as good as we could play. We executed great. Alexandria, for whatever reason, didn't get it done last week. And for people, I know Todd Ginn personally, so I think Todd Ginn's hoping people write them off. That's music to his ears. Write us off, because I promise you they're not going nowhere. So when they play Jacksonville knows this. Clint Smith's been around long enough to know that this is a dangerous, wounded animal Alexandria team that's coming into this game. So I expect that game to be not only a very good game, but a very formidable opponent to each other.
Big time matchup that's going to be taking place right around the Birmingham area. Aniana going to be traveling to Dora on Friday. Aniana won 55-24 against Cleveland from this past week. Dora lost to Winfield, a really good Winfield program that's over there on the west side of the state, 23-20. The head coach at Dora is Shavis Williams. He played at the University of Alabama, was a part of some national championship teams there at the University of Alabama, and has done a really good job since moving over from Carbon Hill to Dora High School. And so should be a really good test for Aniana to start the year. You know, I mean, Dora lost last week, but they lost to a really good Winfield program. It's a really good football program there. And so now for Aniana, this is a good test because you're going on the road. You get to get on the bus. You get to travel all the way down to Birmingham, which is a decent little trip there, and you get to see how's your team going to handle going on the road. There's a lot of, when people play at home, you know, you're in your home comfort. You kind of get used to that routine. When you're on the road, things change. You know, how is this group going to handle the bus ride? Are they going to be quiet on the way down? Are they going to be focused? Or is there going to be a lot of playing around? Are they going to have respect for their opponent going on the road? So I think for Aniana, really good test on Friday. We'll tell them a lot about where they are. Year 6 now for Coach Phil Phillips. You know, he's really established his program there. We saw them compete for a state championship a couple of years ago and be very close to winning the state title there. So, you know, this is going to be a really, really important game. They lost to Cherokee County there in the semifinals last year. And this is a Dora program that made it to round 2 in the playoffs last season as well. So a really good non-region matchup as we get set for region schedules getting going next week and the most meaningful games of the season coming around.
100%. Where do you want to go to next, my friend?
We'll take it over to Ranburne and Wadley. We'll talk about Ranburne and Wadley, and big matchup there for Ranburne and Wadley. Wadley, this is another group we saw compete for state championship in 1A a couple of years ago. Ended up losing to Sweetwater there in the 1A state championship. You know, Ranburne, a good win over White Plains, 31-28 this past week, and then Wadley really dominated Horseshoe Bend. It's a Horseshoe Bend program that has been on the rise, and you know, they've got a coach there that's now been there for 4 or 5 years and has really established his group. So it's a very good win for them to go to Horseshoe Bend and get the win. Ranburne won this game 14-0 last year. It was a tight contest, but for Wadley, they have a lot of guys returning. They had a good group of seniors on that state championship team. They were really young last year, but they have a young player that we saw in that state championship. He was only a 7th grader then. He's a 9th grader now, and I mean, he's in 7th grade, he was 6'1", you know, 200 pounds. So he's a very, very good player, and they've got a lot more of him, you know, in their future. So it should be a really fun game. I mean, like I said, this is a Wadley program that made the state championship 2 years ago, and a lot of these younger guys have a lot of experience, and so should be a really, really good test for Ranburne getting ready for region play next week. And, you know, going on the road, going down to Wadley, it's not an easy place to play down there. So should be a really fun matchup there with those two.
Next game we're going to talk about is going to be Center Point at Aliceville. Kudos to George Bates for doing that home and home with Aliceville. And people who do not know anything about Aliceville, you think, why is George Bates taking this, they're 6A now, on the road to a 2A? Well, if you've not ever seen Aliceville dress out, then you wouldn't know. But if you've seen them dress out, you'll know exactly why he's taking them on the road to a 2A. Center Point beat Tylertown, Mississippi 28-18 last week, which is huge. That is stepping out of the state and handling business. And any time that happens in any format, period, we're excited about it, especially after the debacle of last year's season when every big team we had in the state lost to outer state teams, you know, on a national scale. So kudos to George Bates for scheduling that game. And then Aliceville actually lost to Pickens County last year, and people were like, you know, they lost to a 1A team. Well, they lost to a 1A team that represented the North last year and in the state championship very well. So Center Point won this game last year 48-18. Aliceville went on to the 3rd round and lost 26-22 to Pisgah. If people in this area up here would really remember that game because it was a monumental win for Pisgah last year. I'm talking about Coach Pruitt and company. That changed their whole dynamic and their whole mindset of their program. So that's how much they are respected in the high school football world. I'm talking about Aliceville there. George Bates this year, though, got to handle business. I mean, he needs to go in there and do what he did last year, defeating those guys 48-18 last year. I'm not going to say it's a fluke. At the end of the day, when you start to the nuts and bolts of this thing, you are looking 6A versus 2A. I look for Aliceville to be tough, competitive in that first half. And as the game goes on, George Bates and just keeps rolling guy after guy out there, and they wear them down, in my opinion. This next game, I don't know. I don't even want to talk about this next game because I love both of these coaches. I love both of these communities. And I think both of these teams, if they represented their respective classifications from the North this year in the state championship games, I would not be surprised one bit. We got Geraldine, who's 1-0, at Fife, who played in the Jamboree last week versus Piedmont to a tie. Geraldine beat, the upstart Coosa Christian Conquerors, who has been the talk of the town this season and the last couple of seasons, actually, who's improved each year. Well, not only did they beat them, they shut them out. They shut them out 26-0 in a statement win. Jackson Coven, solid as always. Carlos Mann, game breaker. I mean, scored on chunk plays of 70 and 40-something and 12. Everything he touches that scores is over 10 yards. Counting his receptions and everything, he averaged 12.5 yards per touch. Not surprised by that one bit. But we talked about this earlier. It reminds me of the Cherokee County game last year when they played Piedmont. On paper, when you look across the field and you see Coach Benefield and you see those Red Devil helmets and those uniforms, the psyche of a lot of teams changes. I don't know if it tightens up. There's just something weird. And obviously they've been so good for so long. But Geraldine's the one team that broke the longest winning streak in the nation. So Michael Davis has had some success against them. But man, both of these teams are so good. I'm just glad I'm not an odds maker or a gambling man, because I would not touch that game with a 10-foot pole, period. I'm going to pass it on to you, and we'll go on to the next one.
I mean, that game should be a lot of fun on Friday night, and that's a matchup. Anytime you see Geraldine and Fife matched up with each other, I mean, people around the state take notice. So it should be a fun matchup there. I have a couple of comments. Taylor Westcott asked about Thompson and IMG. That game is actually canceled, so if you didn't see the news today and stuff, IMG is in Florida. Obviously, we got a tropical storm that's about to hit in Florida, and so due to travel stuff, IMG ended up having to kind of cancel the game. They don't think that there's going to be an opportunity to redo it, so it's very unfortunate for Thompson and Coach Mark Freeman coming off of what they did. I mean, I got to see them up close and personal against Opelika this past week, and I mean, they're the favorites in 7A again, and they would have loved to have tested themselves against IMG and have that matchup there, but unfortunately that game was canceled due to the tropical storm or hurricane. I don't know if it's become a hurricane now, but the storm that's about to hit Florida. So very unfortunate there with that news. Before we move on, just again want to thank Rohogo for sponsoring us here and sponsoring this show, this episode of Road to the Blue Map. Check out Rohogo. If you're looking for vacation rental spots, Rohogo is the place to go to. You can just Google Rohogo. It's spelled right for you right there on the screen. Check them out, see what they have to offer. Look, we've been coming up to Guntersville now doing this show. Me and Bo came up during the summer. I've not been to Guntersville a ton in my life, and coming up here, I mean, this is a great place to be. So if you're looking for a great vacation spot, weekend getaway, make sure to check out Rohogo. We appreciate their support for high school athletics and supporting us here on Road to the Blue Map. A good matchup up here around this area, Lexington going to be traveling to Pisgah, who we just talked a little bit about. Big matchup here. I mean, Lexington, a great win to start the season. They beat Colbert Heights 42-25 to get things going. Pisgah had the week off last week, and so this will be their first game of the season and really trying to build off of what they did last year, getting all the way to the semifinals, getting a taste of what it's like to be in those type of big-time atmospheres and have that blue map right there in your grasp. And so it should be a lot of fun to see how Coach Luke Pruitt and his group really responds this week as they host a really good Lexington team. This is a game that came down to the wire last year. Pisgah won 29-28 in this ball game. So it was a tough matchup a year ago. We look for it to be another really tough matchup here. And we've talked about measuring sticks, but this is going to be a really good measuring stick for both of those programs. And, like we talked about, I mean, for Pisgah, first game of the year, you're probably going to have some growing pains early, some mistakes that Lexington was able to get out of the way during their ball game last week. But anytime an offense is able to put up 42 points in week one, you're going in the right direction early in the season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this Pisgah defense really matches up with this Lexington offense.
I agree with that 100%. We're going to take it down to Cherokee County now. You ready for this one? Cedar Bluff Blue Blood versus Sandrock Blue Blood. What do you think about this one? Now, you got, believe it or not, this is going to be a fantastic football game. I'm going to tell you right now, simply for the fact that both of these teams are sitting at 0-1 right now. But both of these teams, coincidentally, have some of the best pride you're going to find in North Alabama. Coach Heath, we've had him on our show I don't know how many times. One of the best human beings you'll ever meet, one of the funniest guys you'll ever meet. Great football coach. Then you look across the field at Garrett Crane, who's taken over the first year for Alan Beckett, who left Cedar Bluff. Both of these guys need this win. When I'm talking about need this win, they both need this win. Last week, Cedar Bluff lost to a very tough Winterboro team, 33-7. Sandrock lost to Spring Garden, 48-22. Neither one of those losses is something you want to hang your hat about. They lost to two really good football teams. And as this season progresses, you're going to see and know that both of those teams were very good teams that they lost to. Both of those teams will be in the playoff teams and probably make pretty deep runs. With that being said, that brings us back to this week. Both of these coaches, communities, and players need this win. This is going to be a gut check game for both of these communities and teams, because the thing you do not want to do is be 0-2 before you even get over into region play. You want to get some type of momentum started. So this is a gut check game for both of these teams.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun there. And another one of those gut check games, Valley Head traveling to Section. Not the start that either Valley Head or Section wanted. For Valley Head, they played good defensively, weren't able to get any offense going as they lost 15-0 to North Sand Mountain. And then for Section, they couldn't stop Decatur Heritage this past week. They give up 63 points to open up the year. They lose 63-15. And look, Decatur Heritage is a really good program. They're a private school. They're able to get some guys in. But, really tough matchup last week for both those teams. This is a game that went into overtime last year, 26-20. Valley Head was able to get the win over Section in this game. And as you just talked about, it's gut check time. I mean, you want to have some momentum. You need some momentum going into region play. And so going to be a really, really interesting and tough matchup there for those two teams. And then Sylvania going to be traveling to Sacs. Should be a fun one to open things up.
Wow.
And, Sacs, tough start to the year this past year. And, we talked about Jonathan Miller earlier, who's now made the move over to Piedmont. New coach coming in for Sacs, and Coach Alfonso Freeney. And, look, they ran into an AHSAA team that we talked about. They started off rough last year, but then they won their final three to get into the playoffs and had a lot of momentum, a lot of confidence as a program. They carried that over into the start of this year and probably surprised Sacs a little bit. I got to see Sacs against Dadeville last year when they played them, and I'll see them again in a couple of weeks when they play against Dadeville. And Sacs had a really good team last year and a lot of guys that were coming back this year as well. And so I think AHSAA and just the way that they were able to play kind of maybe surprised them after you look at film from last year and you see what last year's team was, and it just kind of shows you can't ever base a group off of what they did the year before. And so for Sacs, they need a big bounce-back game, but it's not going to be easy as you welcome in Sylvania for their first game of the year. Sylvania won this game 19-6 last year. It was a tight matchup. And so now for Sacs, you get them at home, you get them at your place. And so it should be a really fun game there. And it's not must-win for Sacs, but as you get into region play starting here soon, and you're going to run into Randolph County, you're going to run into Dadeville, you got Weaver, who looks a lot better this year. It's an important game to really build some confidence and build some momentum as they get region play going here soon.
Next game is going to be AHSAA at Walter Wellborn. AHSAA, all is well in the Creek Bank. I'm telling you, man, after the 0-7 start last year and what we like to call the mongrels was coming over the hills, Coach Finley can't get it done and all this, he quietly went 0-7 and bam, into the playoffs he went. Because the guys started buying in, he started getting his guys healthy, and the next thing you know, they get a little bit of momentum and they go over into the playoffs. So in the record books, yeah, you can give him an 0-7 start, but you're also going to give him credit for going to the playoffs. That's how I'll give you that, but he's going to take this. So now he's got his guys healthy. He's got his legs under him. They're coming into this season with a big win last week, 32-8 over Sacs, who was just mentioned. You know what I mean? They just beat the same Sacs team that's in the county, not too far from AHSAA, that's loaded with talent. He just beat them 32-8, right? So then Walter Wellborn flips around, and that's who their opponent is this week. And Walter Wellborn lost to Anniston, who was a third-round playoff team last year in 4A, who was up 21-0 on the state champions. So don't think for a minute Walter Welborn's down, because Jeff Smith's never down. He's a good coach, and he trains those guys up from middle school on up. They're never down. They're always a good team. You got to see them last year. I helped call the game with you last year. And
they took a Dable team that went undefeated to the end.
To the end, to the cusp on the hill up there. So this one's on the hill. So it's at Welborn. So this is going to be a tough matchup for Findlay. But for them to get out to the start that they got out to last week, that is saying a statement, man. And I'm proud of those guys. And I'm also proud of Jeff Smith, because you know one thing I like about Jeff Smith? No excuses. Yeah, he lost to Anniston. He'll own it. But you know what? That means nothing, because this week, if AHSAA don't come in and execute, they're going to lose. They're going to have to execute. The Hill's not easy to win. You saw that firsthand the first time last year.
It's not an easy place to win.
This is going to be a dogfight. I expect a dogfight out of that one. Next game we're going to talk about is going to be Fort Payne. Fort Payne at Etowah. Now, you look at this. This has become a rivalry over the last few years. If you look at what transpired last week at Fort Payne, they were in a shootout beyond belief. 107 points scored in that game against Scottsboro. They did end up losing to Scottsboro. They were down 49 to 20 something at the half, and then came back and lost. Was it 57-52 or
56-51?
56-51. Okay. All right. Dude, how in the world do you even start to calculate this game and what's going to happen? Because then you look at Etowah and you think, man, you know, they played Springville last week. They're going to go in there. They're going to handle business. They didn't get the execution done, and they ended up losing to Springville. And that shocked a lot of people, not only in our area, people down south. I mean, I went to Etowah my whole entire life and transferred out and graduated from Sardis. I was at Sardis a year and a half. But I was getting text messages from people in Montgomery and everything like, how in the world did Etowah lose? Well, I personally wasn't at the game. We had April at the game. Very, very tough game, I heard. That's having trouble blocking Springville up front. But at the half, these are some stats that will step out at you. Springville was tied with them 7-7 at the half, and Etowah had only gave up 56 points at halftime, or 56 yards total at halftime. So that was a very nip and tuck game, and it was all the way through, but just to show you what Etowah can do. You know what I mean? But they ended up losing, you know, and everybody and their brother has asked me about Jamison. I've been asked about Jamison Sism all summer, and I'm telling you, he is as advertised. He is as good as, I mean, he's as good an athlete Etowah's had in a long time, and he will have a good season. And he's going to be going up against a very good Fort Payne defense. I say that, and they gave up 56 last week, but I think that's kudos to Scottsboro as well.
Well, and they obviously made some adjustments in the second half
100%,
as well. So
obviously, because they only gave up 7 instead of 49. And Bennett Blank, 17 tackles last week. You know, him and Tinker, I named the Hammer brothers. Both of those guys are the real deal, and I know for a fact Matt Glover's got those two guys scheduled. But for Etowah, it's got to be execution. And on defense for Etowah, Varndor, the quarterback at Fort Payne, threw for nearly 500 yards last week. They have got to figure that puzzle out, because that guy was unconscious last week. Kick it back to you.
Just want to let everybody out there knowing that are watching, we're live at Wenzel's in Guntersville, and make sure to be checking out the Average Joe Sports Talk page. We're going to be at some various locations, but we'll be at Wenzel's a good bit throughout the year doing this show. So pay attention to our page throughout the week. We'll let you know where we're doing Road to the Blue Map, and if you want to come and hang out with us and come and watch the show live and you know, be here with us, get to talk with us before, after, all that type of stuff, we'd love to have you guys out here with us. And, you know, come out and support these businesses that are supporting high school athletics, allowing us to do shows like this and give these kids the type of attention that they deserve here throughout the state. Asheville will be traveling to Lincoln. Asheville had a loss to St. Clair County, 41-24 this past week. Lincoln, a dominant win over Talladega, 31-7. It's year 1 for Coach Shep there at Asheville, year 7 for Matt Zedeker at Lincoln. So he's really kind of gotten his program established there the way he wants it. They're coming off a 4-6 year, so you know this is a Lincoln program that's very, very hungry, but it's an Asheville program that's hungry. They went 2-8 last season, did not have the year that they wanted. Coach Shep really trying to turn things around and get them back going in the direction that Asheville expects to be in. this is an important game. You're going to Lincoln. It's a tough place to play. It's a growing school that's starting to get more and more athletes in. And so I look for Lincoln to continue to rise and continue to get better as a football program for them. If you can start out this year 2-0, coming off of 4-6 last year, should be really, really important for them getting off to a start like that. And then for Asheville, you want the first win of Coach Shep's tenure. You want to get some confidence back in there, and you want to show your guys as you get into region play. And we've talked about this multiple times. Hey, we can win, we can compete, and we can't, all the stuff that we've been doing now under Coach Shep is paying off. And so that should be a really fun game on Friday night. And it's a very important game for both places, but it's a really important game for the Asheville Bulldogs to go out there, perform well, and really start to build some momentum back into that program.
Next game is going to be 1-0 Brewer at ARAB. Brewer defeated Hanceville last week 23-7. ARAB beat Albertville 34-6. ARAB won this contest last year 35-0. All this hinges, honestly, and I'm not putting pressure on these guys, but I'm just being honest with you. This hinges on execution from ARAB. Lee Osmond Company shows up, they do what they do, which is play football, physically, run the football, play defense. The ball is going to be in their court to win this football game. We're not, predicting any games here, but, all eyes will be on the ARAB Knights after a 35-0 win last year versus this club. DAR started out 0-1 and a very bad loss to Sardis last week, 60-6. This is not the same Sardis team, though, so don't buy into that. DAR, don't hold your head down, because I think Sardis is going to shock more than just one team this year. I'm not saying 60-6, but at the end, when the smoke clears, this is a much improved Sardis football team, I can promise you. Douglas beat Susan Moore. I can guarantee you this was a tough win last week, 20-0. Not only did they win, they shut them out, and that was very impressive for Douglas. Douglas did win this game last year, 56-7. Year one for Kyle Davis at DAR. Tough start, like we said. He's got to figure some things out. He's got to get some chemistry. He's starting a young 8th grader at quarterback. The kid knows the offense, the execution and the offensive line. There's a lot of intangibles goes into a Kyle Davis offense. And one of them's continuity. One of them's protecting your quarterback. And the other one is going to be executing what he calls on 3 different levels. Because normally when you play a Kyle Davis offense, every blade of grass is suspect to be defended, because he will stretch you in many different ways. And I know he's a really good coach, and I know they're going to turn that thing around. But for Douglas, a shutout last week, you're going to look to jump on these guys early. I know Douglas has – I took a lot of heat for saying this last week, but I kind of stick with it. The best helmet I've seen this year. I mean, I took a lot of heat for saying that last week, but I'll take the heat again this week. Next game, North Jackson at Scottsboro. Scottsboro defeated Fort Payne last week, 56-51, won the Top Cat Trophy, brought it back to Scottsboro for the first time in, I believe, I can't remember how many years, I think it's 5 to 6 years. Scottsboro won 27-18 last year. North Jackson finished 2-8 last year. 4 losses was by 2 possessions or less. Now, Coach Bell, coming off the biggest win in his career at Scottsboro, heading into this game, and I asked Justin Thrasher point blank on the final drive Friday night in studio in Fort Payne. He came and sat in with us. I said, how does Coach Bell bring these guys back down from this ledge, because they're up on such a pedestal, they just won this huge game, and get them focused? He said he don't have to do anything, because when they look across and they see North Jackson written down, that's inter-county rivalry, and they will dial in themselves. He won't have to say a word. That's how huge this game is to them. Kicking it back to you.
Getting a couple comments on Facebook, some people asking about some games. We've gone over a lot of games already. We started this at 7 o'clock, and so if there's some games that you were looking forward to hearing about and we have already gone over them, you can catch the replay of this on our Facebook page at any time. It'll be uploaded right there on Facebook. It's also on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to the Average Joe's YouTube account, make sure to go on YouTube, subscribe to Average Joe Sports Talk on YouTube. We have a lot of stuff that is going on there. We're going to start utilizing that page a lot more and putting a lot more content on our YouTube page. So if you haven't yet, make sure to go to YouTube, check that out. But you can find you can find this show on both of those accounts there on our Facebook page and on YouTube as well, and watch the replay at any
immediately following.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be on there. I mean, it uploads right to it, and it'll be available right when we finish here tonight. Also, want to let everybody tuning in know that we have a Saturday show that we are doing now. Myself, Bo, and then Corey LaBounty from down in Mobile, who also does a lot of work with me in the AHSAA radio network and on TV and stuff as well. We all do that show on Saturday. We started it this past week, and we'll just be running over all the scores from Friday night. You know, Bo is doing his Friday night scoreboard show that he's doing, and then on Saturday we'll kind of break down the action. And again, you can find that on our Facebook page and YouTube. We'll get started at 9:30 every single morning. And so make sure to be looking out for that on Saturdays as we break down all the action and kind of recap a lot of the big scores that go on throughout the state. Big matchup that'll be taking place over in the Birmingham area. Buckhorn will be traveling to Helena. Buckhorn was able to beat Madison County 42-25 this past week. Helena really dominated Chelsea 50-14. It was a great start to the year. You know, a Chelsea program that is in that tough region there in 7A around the Birmingham area. And Helena's a group that's got something to prove. You know, we did a coach's show with Coach Richie Busby last year, who was the head coach there at Helena. And, it's a program that was right there looking like they're about to win the region, and the next thing you know, they're not in the playoffs last season. And so I know he was very disappointed about that. Their team was very disappointed about that. Well, they're out on a mission this year, and they dominated Buckhorn last season 55-17. You know, I remember both of us showing up for that coach's show, and Coach Busby was in such a good mood because that was a really good Buckhorn team that they beat. But they possibly peaked too early in the year last year, playing as well as they did early in the season. And so a big matchup there with those two teams. And for Buckhorn, you're looking to go get some revenge. You know, Coach Patterson has done a really good job up there with those guys. And Buckhorn is, they're not necessarily known for their football history, but he's starting to get them to where people pay attention when Buckhorn football is playing on Friday night. And so a really fun matchup with those two teams. And then I know that Josh Abercrombie has been waiting on this one for a while now.
Oh, here we go.
We'll get to talking about this one. Central Clay traveling to Benjamin Russell. Should be a really fun matchup here. Benjamin Russell is a group that they ended up making it to the playoffs. They went 8-3 last year. They got knocked out by a really good Hueytown team in the first round. And they're going to play host to Coach Danny Horn, who, you can argue about who the best in the state is. He's up there in that conversation no matter where you put. He's top 5, possibly top 3, and he's won 8 state championships, over 300 games in his career. He's closing in on 350, and he's playing against his old school. I played for Coach Horn at Benjamin Russell, and he won 10 straight, or he had 4 straight years where they won 10 or more games while he was there. They made it all the way to the semifinals back in 2015, and he did a great job there. This is going to be a fun matchup. It's always fun when these two teams get together. It's a rivalry that, Central Clay, for those that don't know, it was Clay County and Lineville. They combined schools to become Central Clay. Back in 2012 was their first season. We didn't play Central Clay their first 2 years that they were a program. And then finally, once I graduated, of course, Coach Horn decided to start playing Central Clay. And it's been a fun rivalry there. Benjamin Russell leads the series 5-4, but Central Clay leads the series 3-2 since Coach Horn returned to Central Clay. Everybody knows he won the state championship his first 2 years coming back to Central Clay. And so it should be a really, really fun matchup with those two teams there. And, for Central Clay last year, Benjamin Russell won this game 33-14. It took a while for them to get used to the speed of the game and get used to the speed. We saw Benjamin Russell last year. They had speed all over the field. 4 wide receivers they could spread the ball out to. Their quarterback, Gabe Benton, is back this year. He threw for almost 3,000 yards last season. He's getting recruited in football. He's a possible draft pick in baseball. And just a lot of athleticism, and so I think that's going to be the matchup to really watch for is how can Central Clay match up with the speed that Benjamin Russell puts out there. And then the other big thing, one of the things, Benjamin Russell beat Wetumpka 40-19 last week. Wetumpka gave the ball to Benjamin Russell on their own side of the field 3 different times. The opening kickoff, they had a punt block that Benjamin Russell scored off of. They had another drive that started at the 10. So for Central Clay, can you make the Benjamin Russell offense work a little bit? And then Benjamin Russell's very thin up front defensively. If they can, we know how Coach Horn loves to establish a line of scrimmage, run the football. If they can establish that, it should set up for a really, really fun game on Friday night with those two.
Smitty versus Danny.
Yeah, two of the top, 10, 15 coaches in the state right now competing with each other. Josh
Abercrombie is ripping the knob off his computer right now. Listen to you. You want me to hit these two and then go back to the rest of them?
Yeah.
All right, the next game is a huge, huge game for Oxford. Oxford got off the snide last week versus McAdory. The first time in school history they defeated McAdory. They were 0-4 coming into that game. Oxford goes on and win that game by double digits last week, 33-23. Sam Adams was a happy camper, but Sam Adams was not a satisfied camper when I sat in with him today for his coach's show. He was pleased with some execution, some things that they did, but they have a lot of stuff to clean up, and he knows that heading into this week. A lot of people look at this 7A region out of Huntsville with James Clemens, Huntsville, Florence, and all these guys, and people don't realize, they think that region's terrible. You know, Sam Adams and I talked about this off camera. They're terrible. They can't compete with 7A Region 3. There's not a lot of regions in this country that can compete with 7A Region 3, period, from top to bottom. And I'm going to tell you something else. I promise you, there is D1 athletes galore in Huntsville, Alabama playing football in 7A. They're just not cohesive as those 7A teams in 7A Region 3 out of Birmingham. Now, with that being said, most of these, and I'm saying this, and you may or may not believe me, Caleb, most of these 7A teams out of Huntsville would walk the dog in 6A. They're that talented. So this is a very formidable opponent to Oxford this week. Quarterback Mason Mims last week threw for 337 yards and 3 touchdowns. Nick Richardson, listen to this, 207 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns on only 5 receptions. Wow. Now, what is that, 40 yards a touch?
Yeah.
Okay? So keep an eye out on those two. Next game is Leeds at Pell City. Leeds lost a gut-wrenching loss last week to Mortimer Jordan. Pell City lost 28-24 to Moody in a game that what is the word, protagonists? What are the prediction people? I don't even know what their name is. Yeah. Anyways, the prediction people said they shouldn't even have been in the game with Moody. You know, there's people saying, Moody's going to beat them 40 or 50 or whatever. I mean, I've heard crazy predictions like, 5-6 touchdowns. Well, guess what? They were up 10-0 and ended up losing in the end 28-24 to Moody. Year 5 for Jerry Hood at Leeds. Now, he has changed everything at Leeds. Physical. Defensive front, unmatched in their classification, one of the top 5 in the state. I'll say it. They got one of the top 5 defensive fronts in the state, any classification. They have the best defensive end in the state. But with all that being said, can Rush get these guys up again after a gut-wrenching loss like last week? If anybody can, Rush Probst can. I don't know. This is going to be a really interesting. And what's funny is I watched these two teams interact with one another at the media days this year for St. Clair County. I was down there, and it was a weird, seeing these two teams sat beside each other at tables and talking to each other. And Kavion Henderson is as good as they can be, and I seen him see Rush Probst, and Kavion asked me when I was in the parking lot, is Rush Probst in there? And I was like, yeah. So there's a lot of mutual respect from the kids from Leeds to Rush Probst. So if I could be a fly on the wall at that one. Unfortunately, I've got a show I have to do on Fridays. Another helicopter game, but I'm kicking it back to you.
Yeah, no, it should be a fun matchup. You bring up a good point. I mean, how can Pell City get back up emotionally after all the emotions that went into that game with Moody last week, how big of a rivalry that is, all of that type of stuff. Going to be really fun to watch. Vestavia travels to Homewood. Vestavia dominated Mountain Brook this past week. There's not really another way to put it. We did a show with Coach Robert Evans last year at Vestavia, and I really like Coach Evans. He's building a great program there. Yeah, I mean, he knows what he's doing, and he was the brains behind the defense there at Mountain Brook for such a long time. And, he leaves. Mountain Brook still has a great defense. They go on and play for a state championship. But, Vestavia, not only did they win, they went to Mountain Brook to win this game this past week. And so a great performance for them to get the season started. For Homewood, they didn't have the performance they wanted to get the season started. Coach Bergeson, I know, is very disappointed with how his group played, especially defensively. You go up 36 points. And, we talked about John Carroll last week in that matchup with Homewood and how Coach Will Mara is really building that program up at John Carroll, getting them back to being competitive. That was a huge win for them. But now Homewood gets this game at home against Vestavia. It's a rivalry game. I mean, for those that don't know, Vestavia's here and Homewood's right there. They're in each other's backyard. And so it's a big-time matchup for these two teams. Last year, Vestavia really dominated Homewood. They won 35-0, and a lot of people started doubting Homewood. And what does Homewood do? They go on and they win that region over there with Helena, Benjamin Russell, Pelham, Chilton County, Calera, Briarwood.
How? That was just
Yeah.
amazing.
I mean, so it just shows that some of these early results don't indicate, a lot of these teams are going to get better. They're going to figure themselves out. For Homewood, maybe a loss last week was a good thing in the sense that it wakes this group up. It shows, hey, we still have a lot of work to do, and now they can carry that over into Vestavia. For Vestavia, you're coming off the high of last week. You played really well against another rival. You got your season off to a good start. Now can you go on the road again and do it again this week? Should be a really fun one there. And then this is a huge matchup. It's a rematch of the state championship from 2 years ago in 6A. Clay Chalkville will travel to Hueytown. You got to give Hueytown a lot of credit for the way that they schedule.
The Gophers.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give them a ton of credit, though. I mean, they start off the year with the reigning 5A champs in Ramsey, and then they end up now playing against Clay Chalkville, who won it 2 years ago and beat them in the state championship. It's a great way to challenge yourself and get ready for that region where they're in there with Hillcrest, Tuscaloosa, and Bessemer, and all those teams in there. So should be a fun matchup there. Clay Chalkville beat Briarwood 31-0 last week. Second straight year that they shut them out to start the season. And for Hueytown, 28-14 game with Ramsey. We know what type of athletes that Ramsey has. Clay Chalkville won this game 42-8 last year, but it was really right before Hueytown kind of started to figure themselves out. Hueytown had a rough start to the year last season as well, starting 0-2. And what they do the rest of the year, they go 7-1. So, this is going to be a fun game. It's right there at Hueytown, and like we've talked about, it's not must win, but it should be a really fun game there, and it's one that if Hueytown can get a win, you kind of get over that hump. They lost to Clay Chalkville a couple of years ago in the regular season. Then they rematched in the championship. They lost that game. Then they played again last year. You lose that one. You kind of want to get over the hump and get that confidence of, hey, we can beat them and we can compete with what a lot of people feel like is the best team in the state there in Clay Chalkville. So, should be a fun matchup there, and it should be a lot of fun games on Friday night, Bo. I'm looking forward to seeing all these matchups. I hate that we won't get Thompson and IMG on Thursday night, but as I said earlier, James Clemens, Mountain Brook, that'll be your AHSAA TV game of the week. I'll be on the call for that one with Mickey Shadricks as doing color, so make sure to tune into that if you're not doing anything on Thursday night.
I've got one more I got to knock out real fast. I haven't got on our notes, I forgot to hit it. West End and Susan Moore. You talk about an inter-county rivalry. Another don't look too much into last week's scores type thing. West End had a monumental win, 48-0 over Bryan Knapp and Galesville. Susan Moore did lose 20-0 last week, but that was against Douglas, who actually is in 5A. So, and a playoff team from last year. You got to look out for this game. This is a game. How many miles away from each other are they, Reggie?
Like 5 or 6.
5 or 6 miles away from each other. These two teams are not too fond of each other. These two communities respect each other. But on Friday night, there will be some fur flying in that one. And I do believe this one's in Walnut Grove, is it not? No, it's actually at Susan Moore. It's at Susan Moore. So, yeah, that makes it even more impressive. So don't buy into the 2 first week. I'm not saying that, I'm not taking nothing away from the 48-0 win. And I'm definitely saying that Susan Moore's not as bad as the 20-0 win. That'll be a tough one. But, yeah, you're right. Friday night's fun, and I'm going to kick it to you what we got coming up.
We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we will have our Watkins Heating and Air Games of the Week brought to you by Reggie Davis. So we'll take a quick break. Stay tuned. Don't tune out. You're going to want to hear about these 4 games. So we'll be back with more right here on Average Joe Sport Talk and our road to the blue map right after this. There you go. Welcome back into Road to the Blue Map, presented by Rohogo. If you are looking to vacation and need a rental property or need a rental house, whatever to look to Rohogo Vacation Rental Properties. Check them out. And, Guntersville is a great place to come and visit. I mean, I love being up here every week. You love being up here every week. Make sure to visit Rohogo. And we appreciate their sponsorship here, as well as the Pink House up here in Guntersville and the Henry House as well. Those are three great places to check out if you're looking to vacation and need rental places, rental rooms. Those are the place to go to. So make sure that you Google them, check them out, check out their website, and get all the information that they need. All right, Reggie, it is time for the Watkins Heating and Air Games of the Week. We want to thank Brad Watkins and his group there at Watkins Heating and Air. Wouldn't be able to do this segment, do this show without the support of people like them. So look, if you're around the Fife area, the Plainview area, all up out in there, make sure to check out Watkins Heating and Air. Let them come work on your HVAC unit, and they'll give you the best air condition, best heat, whatever it is. And we're getting that time of year where we're about to be in the middle of it being hot, being cold, hot, cold. And so you're going to want to make sure that you have a good HVAC place. Watkins Heating and Air is the place to look to. So Reggie, getting things started, we normally would do 5 games. We found out today that we lost a game that we've already talked about with Thompson and IMG, and that game now not happening. But getting us started with the big matchup up in this area, Sardis at New Hope. Should be a really fun game there with those two teams, and Sardis coming off a huge win last week, really looking to build off of that.
Oh, yeah. I'm not surprised by B.J. Brooks and the performance his team had last week. BJ's he's an offensive guy. I know he's a very offensive-minded guy, and spending a year at Hoover, I'm sure he was able to learn a lot of things, been on that step at Hoover, and he's brought a lot of energy and a lot of confidence to the Sardis team this year. And those guys came out and showed what they can do in that opening game, scoring 60 points, and that's to be expected. Brian Chapman, he's up for Player of the Week for the Gadsden Times, and he had 5 passing touchdowns. So, congrats to those guys, and looking forward to seeing what they're going to do for the rest of the season.
Another big matchup that'll be taking place right here where we're at in Guntersville, Lawrence County, traveling over here to Guntersville. And a big-time matchup for Guntersville, and one that they definitely, being at home, having a team travel across the state, need a win on Friday night.
Definitely. Guntersville had a gut-wrenching win last week against a very good Southside team. They were down 10-7 with 7 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter, and Guntersville came out with a big play. They were able to go up 14-10 and had a huge goal line stand to keep Southside out the end zone late in the fourth quarter. So that, for those guys, I'm sure, knowing how good Southside is this year, that was a very good win for them and a definite confidence booster going into the season. So looking forward to seeing how this game is going to turn out with Lawrence County. Like I said, for Guntersville, having them at home again, I'm sure will help, and the Guntersville folks will be out supporting them.
Another big game, Gaston traveling to Appalachian. For Gaston, really important game to really kind of build off of last week and carry it over into this one.
Man, let me tell you about that Gaston team. Shout out to Coach Beckett and Jesse Pruitt over there at Gaston. Coach Beckett, I don't know if a lot of people know, took that job at Gaston 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And before Coach Beckett was hired, Jesse Pruitt took the reins and led the team through the first part of fall camp, and Coach Beckett came in and did his thing. He's known for turning programs around in the state. He's done it before, and he comes in and more kids come out to football. I think they had 13 kids before he got there, and now they're up to 24 kids on the roster. And they came out and shocked a lot of people and getting that huge win over Asbury. I'm sure for such a young team, and after going through so much, that's got to be huge for them. And there's a lot of confidence going on at Gaston. Coach Beckett emailed me today and said the parents have been coming out, getting things done around the field. They're feeding the team after the games. So there's a lot of great things going on at Gaston, and I'm looking forward to seeing what these guys are going to do against a very good Appalachian team.
And then, I know you've been looking forward to talking about this game here, and there's a lot of people that have been tuning in that are waiting to hear about this ball game. This is a big-time matchup. It's 2 former region opponents that are now playing in the non-region. And, for Gadsden, they had a huge win this past week. And for Hewitt-Trussville, a tough one as you take on Phoenix City, and they fall 48-24. So they're looking to bounce back. But talk to us about this matchup and what is your game of the week this week.
Man, this game, I think a lot of people probably looked at this game before the season started and said Hewitt-Trussell's going to come in here and just wipe the floor clean with Gadsden City. But what a lot of people don't know, Coach Ollie Smith has been slowly building that program into 6A contenders, and that's what he wants to do. And I think the things that he's been doing with these guys is starting to pay off. Carver came up last week. Very athletic team. These guys are huge. When I saw them, they didn't have the numbers that Gadsden City had, but they had some size, they had some speed, they were very athletic, and Gadsden City's defense took care of business and just, they dominated. I mean, that was probably one of the best defensive performances I've seen from Gadsden City in quite a while, and those guys played with with some fight in them, and you can tell they were angry. And I mean, there were helmets flying all night, and after last year's game with Hewitt-Trussell, I'm sure the Titans are wanting to come in for a little revenge. They got them at home, a lot of confidence going into this game. So looking forward to seeing what the Gadsden City defense is going to do against that high-flying Trussville offense, because they like to throw the ball around with Peyton Floyd at quarterback. So like I said, you can't look too much into that Phoenix City game. Hewitt-Trussell's a good team. So this is going to be a very good matchup. I think a lot better than what people expect.
And being a guy that's from Gadsden, I mean, just talk about the importance of this. If they can get a win over a team like Hewitt-Trussville, who is always right there competing in that region in 7A, what can that do for the confidence of this team going forward? It's
going to turn a lot of heads around the state if Gadsden City gets this win. Like I said, after last year, I think people kind of wrote them off, but looking at that game last week, I was like, this is a different Gadsden City team. The sideline was a lot different this week, last week. There was a lot of people there. I was shocked at the number of people that came out and sat through this game in the heat. They had a community pep rally the week before the season. There were a ton of people out. So Gadsden, there's a lot of excitement at Gadsden City, new administration, a lot of positive things happening. So, and I think it's spilling over into the football season. So, it's going to be huge. I'm excited about it. I'm gonna take my homer hat off. I mean, I'm looking forward to this game.
Yeah, no, I can tell you're excited about it. So
I am.
I'm excited about it too. I mean, like we said earlier, there's a lot of fun matchups on Thursday night and on Friday night. You can't beat high school football in the state of Alabama, and so it should be a lot of fun. Again, want to thank Brad Watkins and Watkins Heating and Air. I saw where he was tuning in. Not sure if he's still tuned in, but I appreciate you, Brad, and you guys' support for what we do here with Average Joe Sport Talk. Yeah. And, you made a good post I saw on your Facebook post. When you guys see these advertisers, whether it's with us, whether it's, out at a Little League game, whatever it is, when you guys see these advertisers, go and support them, because they're supporting this. They're supporting us, allowing to promote these kids. And, if you're playing Little League, they're supporting your Little League program. And people wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things they do without the support of their advertisers. So make sure that you go out and support them as well. So that's going to wrap it up for us on this week's episode of Road to the Blue Map. Again, thank you to Rohogo and their sponsorship as well here of this show. Make sure to check out the Pink House, Henry House, and Rohogo here in Guntersville. If you're looking to vacation, you're looking for good rental properties, anything like that, make sure to check them out. And we appreciate their support for high school athletics right here with Average Joe Sports Talk. As I mentioned earlier, we will have a show Saturday morning, 9:30. It'll be on Facebook and YouTube. Myself, Bo Starkey, Corey LaBounty breaking down all the scores from Thursday night and Friday night and giving you a good recap of everything that goes on during the week. So for Bo Starkey, Reggie Davis, I'm Caleb Brooks, and we will see you again next week for another episode of